We are live now to YouTube.
So we'll give it another minute and get started. Let's see. Okay, so 6 o'clock right on the button. I think we'll get started. It looks like we have quite a few participants online. So good evening, everyone. My name is MJ Merritt. I'm the Director of the Economic Growth and Community Development Services Department for Loyalist Township. Please be aware that this session is being recorded, so it can be live streamed through our channel. So please let us know if this will be a problem. So I would like to thank everyone for attending this virtual public information session regarding the Loyalist Township Infrastructure Master Plan project. Public engagement is a very important aspect of the master plan process, and the whole team is very excited to host this public engagement opportunity this evening. I will take a few minutes to introduce the main presenters and team members involved tonight. So we have Mr. David Thompson, our Chief Engineer, Ms. Jenna Campbell, the Manager of our Engineering and Environment Division. Both Dave and Jenna are co-leading this project. Our MC this evening is Mr. Dan Hendry, also from the Engineering and Environment Division. Dan will keep us on track during the questions and answers section, strategically placed throughout the presentation. And in the background, well, you can see her, but in the background, we have Miss Larissa Tassielli, who will be recording questions and feedback so we can provide official responses. I also wish to acknowledge the invaluable assistance of corporate services with the proceedings of this virtual meeting, including recording and live streaming of this session. We have a lot of material to cover this evening, so we won't be able to have too many in-depth discussions on any given topic, but we will provide a wide range of examples being considered in the master plan exercise to start the thought process and conversation. There will be more opportunities over the next several months to have detailed discussions or provide feedback as we work through specific pieces of the plan, through such tools as surveys or focus group discussions. At any time, please use the project email address to correspond with the team. You will see it throughout the presentation. Every email will be responded to. So without further ado, I will ask Dan to proceed with some housekeeping items before we get going.
Thank you so much, MJ. My name is Dan Hendry, and I am helping with the IMP process here at Loyalist Township. If you're able to, put your name and maybe, if applicable, an organization, if you'd like, in the Zoom chat box. This is a formal process which we're capturing as much as we can to inform the plan. The purpose of today's session is an overview of the project. What is an infrastructure master plan and why do communities do this? Core infrastructure breakdown. Opportunities for input. And with that being said, today is kind of a kickoff for the preliminary public information meeting and session we have tonight. There will be, though, a lot of opportunities throughout the course of the project, but more importantly, if you go to and use the infrastructure master plan at Loyalist email, or if you go to loyalist.ca, on the project page, there's a forum in which you can put input at any point of the process. So please use those as mechanisms if able. If you see something after learning tonight what this is about and you want to make some comments, please, live feedback is very important for the future infrastructure of Loyalist Township. With that being said, I'd like to see, if you're able to, tonight specifically, we're monitoring the email address there you can see on screen, as well as the Zoom chat box and social media on Facebook and Twitter as well for comments coming in. And as MJ said, there will be lots of times I'll come on quickly, depending on how many Q&A and questions are there for the team. But I'm there. There'll be lots of times between with a specific slide up to give feedback. With that being said, I'd like to hand it over to Dave for the starting of the session.
Thanks, Dan, and good evening to our virtual audience. Jenna and I represent over 40 years of infrastructure within Loyalist Township, and we're being assisted on this project by a very capable multidisciplinary team of Loyalist staff members, and we're proud to say the bulk of this project is being completed in-house. The township will only be using consultants for specialist work on an as-need basis. I'm going to start the presentation tonight with an introduction of the Infrastructure Master Plan project, which we simply refer to as the IMP project. We have a lot of acronyms, and I'm going to try and stay away from them, but unfortunately it's a lot easier to say some of these things in acronym form than trying to spit out the whole mouthful sometimes, but we'll get through that. Later on, I'll be outlining the township's initial thoughts regarding transportation and storm drainage projects, and Jenna will be focusing on potable water and wastewater topics. Again, thank you for tuning into our virtual project information session. We hope that this overview of the project scope will encourage people to come forward with questions and comments to the project team. We're going to start with a review of the scope of the IMP. In order to understand the project scope, some background is required regarding the Municipal Class Environmental Assessment, or MCEA process. We will also highlight some of the background resources already available within the township. An infrastructure master plan is defined as a long-range plan that integrates the infrastructure requirements for existing and future land use with environmental assessment principles. After we discuss the MCEA process as it applies to this project, we will present the work completed to date and expected featured milestones and related timelines. We will end the session with information on how you can send comments to the project team. The infrastructure master plan is looking at Loyalist core infrastructure, water system, the sanitary sewer system, the stormwater management system, and the transportation system over a planning horizon of the next 25 years. It is important to understand that the MCEA by design only applies to the 4 types of infrastructure projects. I'm going to repeat it again: water, storm, sanitary, and roads. And I shall explain why in a few moments. I would like to note that when I refer to transportation or roads in this presentation, I'm using the terms in a broad sense, and the terms include all infrastructure in the right-of-way, including pavement structures, sidewalks, signals, and lighting. On the next slide, the project was originally conceived knowing that the township's water and sewer infrastructure would soon require some expansion of capacity. The project's concept was initially developed based on what I would describe as hard engineering needs. Can we treat sufficient amounts of potable water for the expected development? Can the sewage plant safely treat the wastewater in 25 years if growth continues as expected? Which township roads and intersections will require upgrading to meet expected traffic increases? How will these projects be funded? These are the types of questions that we expect to answer in the IMP final report. Once we got started on the project, it became apparent that we should expand the scope and assess the township for remedial concerns. It was apparent that the project should also consider improvements that might be considered priorities by the people that live in the local communities. Example of some of these improvements might be better sidewalk connectivity between neighborhoods, improved traffic calming, development of more multi-use trails, bike paths, etc. You might say that all of these projects sound really good, and what is the delay in implementation? but everyone needs to realize that many of these improvements are funded primarily from general taxation, and the Council of the Day faces many priorities in establishing its annual budgets. I mentioned a moment ago that the IMP would only be including potable water, stormwater, sanitary sewer system, and the transportation project in the scope. That means that many municipal activities are excluded from the IMP, including parks and sports fields, administration, buildings, waste management, planning approvals for new subdivisions, commercial and industrial sites. Incidentally, new developments, like I just mentioned, are subject to the requirements of the Planning Act, which follows a very similar process to the municipal class environmental assessment. In the case of Loyalist Township, we are also excluding from the IMP scope rural roads and drainage and transit improvements. These latter two activities, and I know very important to the rural community, are eligible under the provincial requirements to be included in the MCA process. However, the township already has independent studies underway on these two topics, so there was no need to duplicate the effort. The infrastructure master plan has been intentionally designed to complement the township's asset management plan that includes all of the existing assets, and the IMP will only be looking at those projects where either new infrastructure is required or where the existing infrastructure is to be enhanced. For this discussion, enhance means increased capacity or the infrastructure is upgraded to meet new standards. This means that existing infrastructure, which due to its age or condition needs life cycle maintenance or replacement, will not be assessed as part of the infrastructure master plan. Instead, life cycle replacement planning is administered through the township's asset management program, and the resulting projects are typically funded by the general taxation or water and sewer user rates for utility projects. An example of a life cycle replacement is replacement of an old water main on a residential street. It's the township's experience that after approximately 60 or 70 years in the ground, the metallic pipes need replacement. This type of project will not be evaluated in the infrastructure master plan. I'm just going to stop for a second. Is my signal coming through okay? I just got a little warning thing. MJ, you're reading me okay? Thank you. Sorry.
Yep.
For another example, we can look at some older residential areas in Bath and Odessa where drainage standards are less than current design requirements. If a decision is made to improve the swale or ditch system or an underground sewer is required, then this is an enhancement and would be included in the IMP for consideration. Okay, next slide. So fortunately, the township has some excellent documentation available that can be used for guidelines and resources for the infrastructure master plan. This little sketch or group of icons just outlines some of the projects that we are, some of the resources we have on file. Important topics to be included in the IMP are external factors such as regulatory or technological changes. One key source of information that's not shown on the slide are the many engineering reports retained by the township over the years, which focus on the needs of new developments and the capacities of key infrastructure within the township, such as the Lakeview Sewage Pump Station or the Bath Water Plant. All of these documents collectively provide the technical background to initiate the IMP project. And we've actually been looking at all these various documents for the last few months. Next slide. I've used the term Municipal Class Environmental Assessment, or MCA, several times already. What does it mean? I suspect the term is not familiar to most people in the room, so I'll take a moment to explain the process. Ontario has legislation called the Environmental Protection Act. At a high level, this act's objective is to protect and improve the environment and environmental conditions. The Environmental Protection Act is broad in its application and results in municipalities planning their infrastructure projects to meet the requirements of the Act. The Act allows for certain types of projects to be grouped together as a class. Projects within the class are expected to have predictable environmental impacts. This predictability allows for a common planning process to be utilized. The Environmental Protection Act allows for similar projects within a class assessment to be approved, provided that the proponent has met the requirements of the Class EA. The Municipal Class EA includes 4 types of core infrastructure. The 4 types of core infrastructure previously mentioned: water, storm, sanitary, and roads. Just excuse me for a sec here. If you remember early in my presentation, I would say that we are looking at only the 4 types of core infrastructure. It all comes back to the requirements of the municipal class environmental assessment. Loyalist Township, as a proponent of the infrastructure master plan, is therefore required to complete the requirements of the municipal class EA in order to meet the legislative requirements of the Environmental Protection Act. It is important to note that for some of the township's planned projects, other types of government approvals may be required. This chart is taken from the Municipal Class Environmental Assessment Manual. You'll note that there's 5 phases, starting with phase 1, which is problem identification, and ending with phase 5, which is project implementation or construction. A master plan addresses phases 1 and 2 of the Municipal Class EA. Therefore, the master plan must complete the following prescribed activities: community and agency engagement, that's kind of what we're doing tonight; inventory of natural, social, and economic environment; identify alternative solutions; identify impacts of alternative options on the environment; evaluate alternatives; recommend solutions for each project. For the projects within the IMP, the province has designated Loyalist Township to administer the Crown's duty to consult regarding Indigenous and treaty rights on its behalf. The township has set out initial project introductory information to the identified Indigenous communities. By doing a master plan, the township can combine many of the prescribed planning activities for all the projects at once, instead of doing all of these steps for each applicant, for each applicable project. This approach will be cost and time effective over the long term. The slide in front of you is simply a schematic of the 4 types of core infrastructure that Loyalist will be evaluating. We're trying really hard to make sure that you know by the time this is done that we're talking about water, storm sewer, sanitary sewer, and roads. Master plans don't have to focus on all 4 types of infrastructure. They're very focused. Since many projects within Loyalist are driven by a common theme of local growth and geographically relatively close together, it was decided that a master plan that included all types of core infrastructure was most appropriate. Loyalist's last master plan exercise evaluated the long-term needs of Amherstview's and Odessa's wastewater systems and was completed in 2004. And I'm now going to turn over the presentation to Jenna.
Thanks, Dave. Okay, so moving forward, we're reviewing through the IMP, we're reviewing 5 different themes. So we're looking at growth. So in terms of where we require water and sewage plant expansions, if there are infrastructure improvements that are necessary to provide adequate levels of service, what are our water storage requirements? Do we have sewage pumping station expansions that are necessary, or the need for new sewage pumping stations? The second theme is remedial actions that are required to be taken. So that might include things like improvements to water or sewage treatment process steps, the potential to provide stormwater treatment where it is not currently provided, and sidewalk linkages to facilitate walkability and active transportation. From a regulatory standpoint, we may be looking at things such as our infill development targets in the county's official plan and secondary units as of right, and how these policies may impact transportation networks, stormwater management, and water and sanitary capacity in both mains and at the treatment plants, while recognizing that these policies are important from a compact development and climate change mitigation standpoint. We'll also be reviewing impacts of recent and upcoming changes to environmental approvals for sanitary and stormwater collection networks as another example of the regulatory theme. Under the theme of technology, we'll be looking at things such as water, sanitary, and stormwater process upgrade opportunities. So are we able to do more within the same footprint, for example, because of technology upgrades? Reduced water consumption and sewage generation due to improvements in plumbing fixtures, such as low flow shower heads and faucets and improvements to toilets. And what is the impact of autonomous vehicles or low carbon fuel vehicles? Under the climate change theme, we'll be looking at both adaptation and mitigation measures. So how we can adapt to the impacts of increased precipitation or increased drought, for example. This will have impacts on stormwater management, sizing, and municipal drinking water intake requirements, perhaps. And under mitigation, an example is looking at improvements to active transportation networks to reduce dependence on vehicles. The goals of the IMP process. So we'll be putting together a great deal of background information and providing analysis and interpretation of technical concepts. At the end of the day, we're interested in four main items. So we're going to be developing a project list. So what are the projects that need to be undertaken over the next 25 years? The timing of these projects. So at what point during that 25-year horizon does each project need to be implemented? The cost of each project, both from an initial capital standpoint, as well as the life cycle cost, considering operational requirements and other interventions. And then project funding. So what sources will be used to fund the project? So this part is also very important. So which portion of the project is growth related and should be paid for by the development community as compared to the portion that should be covered by the general public? And for growth related projects, which costs are related to transportation and stormwater, therefore covered by development charges, as compared to impost fee related water and sewage projects? Or is there a portion of the project that is specifically related to local development and should be paid by a specific developer? In addition to that, we're looking at which amounts from the general public type projects would be paid for by water and sewage charges versus the amount to be paid through general taxation. So the township undertook a growth study in 2019, which will form the basis for our growth related planning in the project. It's expected that the township will see growth of approximately 5,200 residents in 3,300 new households over the next 25 years. The growth study predicts a steady decline in persons per household over the study period, and we're reviewing how that will impact our systems. So for example, how will water usage and sewage generation per household be impacted if less people are in each home? And are there traffic related implications? We'll be reviewing those sorts of questions. Employment is also expected to grow over the study period to 6,140 people working in the township. And although the study was just completed recently, we do expect to see volatility and growth in the area due to the pandemic and other factors. So the plan will be completed using the current growth study, but we recognize that some areas may experience growth at a faster or slower rate than anticipated. For example, we're currently experiencing much higher than expected building rates in most of our urban areas. It is possible that some growth related projects may need to occur earlier or later in the planning period as a result of this volatility. The work completed to date. So what we've done so far, we've developed a team. As Dave noted, it's a multidisciplinary team made up primarily of internal township staff from the Engineering and Environment Division, Utilities, Public Works, Planning, Corporate Services, Asset Management, Finance, Recreation, and our recreation and facilities divisions. We've developed a draft scope document where we've determined what would be included in the project as outlined previously with our 4 areas of focus and 5 themes. We've undertaken some pre-consultation with the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks to ensure that we're using the correct master plan method and the correct process to inform the ministry of the project. We've also started to draft an initial list of projects, but we're looking for feedback from the public to augment this list and ensure we have considered everything that all of you feel we should be including. And we welcome and are looking forward to your assistance with this task.
Thanks, Jenna. It's me again, Dan. I'm here to help. And this is what you're going to see throughout the presentation and now at a greater frequency after each kind of section, whether it be a wastewater or water, sanitary, transportation, stormwater, or miscellaneous tasks that we'll be presenting and sharing some information today. So this is that quick time. If you have a question midway, there's about 5 or 6 more check-in points. So any questions out there, if you'd like to raise your hand on Zoom, enter in the Zoom chat box. The email here is being monitored at infrastructuremasterplan@loyalist.ca. So I'll just give it a second here, but this is what you're going to see throughout. So there's a lot of kind of meat and potatoes there, but the project and what we're focusing on, but the next slides will be a lot more specific around some of the project details. So I'll give it a second here. I don't have any house music in the background, but if there's any questions, if not,
there are 2 questions in the, sorry, Larissa. Sorry, there are 2 questions in the chat, Dan.
Okay. Oh, sorry there. Well, I'm going to read them out loud and maybe Jenna and Dave, if that's okay, I'll read them out and somebody can answer them there. Will future utility needs, example, power, phone, cell service, be included in the IMP? If not, where will those be addressed? That's a great question, Tony. I'll read that one out. And then there's another question after. But Jenna or Dave, would you like to handle that? Oh, your mic, Dave. Sorry, quick.
Sorry, I'll take the first one there, Jenna, if you don't mind taking the second one on the building permits. But to Tony's question, will future utility needs, power, phone, cell service be included in the IMP? If not, where are those needs addressed? The short answer is no, they're not included in the IMP. If I go back to what I would explain in the legislation, we're solely looking at core infrastructure, municipal core infrastructure, roads, water, sewer, sanitary, whatever I missed there. But to answer your question, the township really doesn't have a lot to say with any of the other utilities that you mentioned, other than there's a coordination role that the township has when development is occurring. And township staff regularly deal with the firms like Enbridge or Bell, Hydro One, to make sure that the services are in place and make sure the communications are there, that those companies know what development's coming and how quickly they need to upgrade their services to meet the demand, all that sort of thing. And I would say for the most part, it works fairly well. The private companies meet the consumer demand. The obvious exception of that is the the rural cell and rural internet coverage continues to be an issue. And in that case, there is political efforts going underway for rural servicing improvements. I'm not up on that, but that information could be provided if you'd like it. In terms of Hydro One, there's kind of 2 levels. Local planning, local servicing is the local LDC is Hydro One. So everything goes through them. Coordination of larger supply is the independent electrical service operator, I think it's called. And they coordinate all of the local distribution companies in Ontario and monitor the grid and make sure like the major power sources are available. So if that's not enough information, just send us an email in on the email address or we'll follow up later. Thanks.
Thanks, Dave. And this is exactly it. We're again monitoring the Zoom box in which we have another question, any hands raised or the email there. Another question here is how many building permits were issued in 2019 and 2020? The projections seem low.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. So I can answer that question. So in 2019, there were just under 100 building permits issued for new dwelling units. And in 2020, the number was approximately 130. The numbers for 2021 are looking like they're going to be significantly higher than that, with approximately almost 80 permits issued in the first 4 months of this year. So hopefully that answers that question.
Thank you. If there's, again, there will be more opportunities just like this. So if you have any other questions, feel free to drop them in and we'll have another slide like this in a couple slides. So I might let Jenna, if you'd like to continue, if that makes sense.
Dan, just one sec. There is
sorry,
Mr. Hilson has his hand up.
Oh, sorry. I couldn't see that, Mr. Hilson. Go ahead, Debbie. Would you like to allow Mr. Hilson to ask his question?
Mr. Hilson, you will have to unmute and then you should be able to talk.
Yes, I am here. Thank you. Are you hearing me?
Yep.
My question is in relation to the comment about the working township. And my questions are, one, does that mean living in the township and employed, or does it mean employed within the township?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So I think in reference to the number, sorry, I'll just grab it here. I think your question is in reference to the number of the 6,140 people that I noted in terms of employment. So that is the number of people expected to be working within for businesses or other agencies within Loyalist Township. Yeah, does that answer your question?
Well, it has no reference to whether you're living in the township or not.
So those people may or may not live in the township, but their place of employment is situated within Loyalist Township.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Olson. And Jenna, sorry, unless I do apologize. I couldn't see that hand there. I do apologize if there's, but Debbie, thank you for helping with that. And let's keep on going. We'll have another slide just like that after a bit more information.
Sorry. Okay, so the next portion of the presentation will look at the requirements by focus area. We have a number of tasks to fulfill the requirements of the environmental assessment process, as well as in the 4 major areas of water, sanitary sewage, stormwater, and transportation. In these areas, we'll be reviewing the 5 themes as explained earlier. So those themes are growth, remedial projects, technology, regulatory, and climate change. And we'll also be discussing miscellaneous tasks, such as those required due to line of sight of other municipal plans. So in terms of environmental assessment tasks, this is the first set of tasks we'll review. And as noted previously, we're undertaking this work through the Municipal Class Environmental Assessment, or MCEA, process. So following initial consultation with the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks, the first task in the MCEA process is the Notice of Commencement, which was issued in late May. We're here tonight for one of the first steps of the public and agency engagement process, and there will be many additional opportunities to share your thoughts and ideas throughout the project. We will be, sorry, just to back to the last one, MJ, sorry. We will be inventorying the natural, social, and economic environment, including climate change factors, to review how each of the proposed projects improves or detracts from the environment as compared to status quo. Examples of items that may be reviewed with respect to the social environment factor include health, cultural resources, aesthetics, land uses, or impact of construction. Natural environment factors could include impacts on surface or groundwater or impacts to environmentally sensitive areas. And economic environment factors might include life cycle costing or capacity to increase growth opportunities. Our reviews of natural heritage features will generally be limited to work being proposed in undisturbed areas. However, there may be areas where we will need to review impacts upstream or downstream of a process or facility. Following the identification of environmental features, we will be identifying the impacts of alternative solutions on the environment and looking at opportunities to mitigate impacts. Mitigating measures could include making changes to a proposed way forward or choosing a different solution to a problem. It's important to remember that in this context, we're looking for sustainable solutions that ensure the best outcome when considering the natural, social, and economic environment in a holistic manner. At this stage in the process, solutions will then be evaluated, additional consultation will be undertaken, and preferred implementation solutions will be identified. Once a draft version of the final report and its recommendations is available, we'll be posting it for further public comment. And comments that are received will be reviewed and considered to determine appropriateness, then the final version will be drafted. At that point, a notice of completion will be published. Then the Ministry of the Environment, Conservation and Parks will determine whether the requirements of the process have been met. And a Section 16 order, which is essentially an appeal, may be requested by any person on the grounds that it may prevent, mitigate, or remedy adverse impacts on constitutionally protected Indigenous and treaty rights. We're developing a plan to obtain feedback and participation from a number of different stakeholders. We encourage everyone to stay informed by signing up to our email list through the Infrastructure Master Plan page on the township's website, or by emailing infrastructuremasterplan@loyalist.ca. As noted above, we will have many more opportunities for your participation as the project moves forward, and we look forward to interacting with you.
Another quick stop in to see if there's any hands to raise, to see if there's any questions out there. The Zoom chat box, the email is being monitored as well. The next step will be the water tasks, if a little bit of a foreshadow there, but just kind of keep an eye out for any questions quick. I don't see any in the chat. Debbie, would there be any hands up? I apologize, I can't see that on my monitor right now.
I don't see any hands up at this point.
Perfect. There'll be more of these slides coming down the pipe. Oh, sorry.
Mr. Hilson is, nope, we're good.
Thank you. No problem. And I was just making my pun of the night. There will be more coming down the pipe. We're heading on to water. Jenna, I think you're back on. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. Okay, so water tasks. This is the first technical piece to review tonight. So our water systems are generally in very good shape and have received appropriate interventions over the last number of years to ensure that they are well positioned for performance and growth requirements. A reminder that the Infrastructure Master Plan will not include end-of-life replacement activities, as those are covered by the township's asset management plan. So you may think of this in terms of your own home, where the replacement of your existing roof at the end of its useful life when it starts to leak would be covered under asset management, whereas the addition of a new garage would be something we would consider through the Infrastructure Master Plan process. This means that a project to replace the water main on a local street at the end of its useful life, such as the work that is commencing soon on Chesterfield, Territon, and Bakers Lane and Amersfoort, would be an asset management activity and would not be covered under the plan that we're discussing this evening. A major component of the water system review is to look at the growth-related projects that will be necessary to facilitate ongoing development in the township. We have two water plants in Loyalist Township. One is in Amersfoort on Highway 33 at the end of Fairfield Boulevard. This is called the Fairfield Water Treatment Plant. The Fairfield Water System services Odessa, Amersfoort, Harewood, and Brooklands, as well as our Loyalist East Business Park and Taylor Kidd Industrial Park. This facility currently has a capacity of 8,000 cubic meters per day, And nearly all of that plant's rated capacity is currently in use or has been allocated to approved developments in Amherst View and Odessa. We will be reviewing the needs of this system, but believe that expansion requirements for the planning period can be facilitated within the existing plant footprint through process upgrades. The second water treatment plant facility is the Bath Water Treatment Plant, which is located on Main Street in Bath between Centennial Park and the Fairfield Goodsite House. This facility services the Bath community as well as Millhaven and Bath penitentiaries through agreement with corrections. The township has just completed an upgrade to the filtration system at this plant to improve the redundancy of the system and allow it to function better during raw water conditions that are often present following large storms. This facility is rated at 6,000 cubic meters per day, of which approximately 45% of the capacity is allocated to corrections. Of the capacity that is controlled by the municipality, approximately 90% is currently in use or has been allocated to developers who prepaid for previous plant upgrades. With the limited capacity available, it is not possible to permit large developments at this time in Bath outside of the capacity controlled by existing development corporations. We will also review the growth needs for this system over the planning period. And both water plants will be reviewed to determine whether any other process improvements are required over the planning period. However, we believe that these needs will be minimal. As outlined previously, the future needs review is complicated by variable factors such as growth rates, changing demographics, including the number of people per household, and various consumption due to improvements to fixture flow rate in homes. Water usage also varies by system, with the Amherst View system using approximately 10% more water per equivalent residential unit than the Bath system. So we will also need to consider system-wide loss considerations and ongoing work targeting leaks and other water loss in the system. The water distribution system, so the pipes in the ground, will also be reviewed through the project. So we'll be looking at areas where water mains may need to be upsized or pressure zones may require review. We will also review the need for any trunk water mains to development lands. And just a reminder here that water main replacement on local streets that are typically replaced at the end of their useful life are covered through the township's asset management plan and not through this process. Storage requirements will also be reviewed to ensure that storage facilities are sufficient to provide adequate peak hour and fire flow requirements and to make plans to ensure that no areas of the township become deficient over the planning period in terms of water storage. A reminder for the water tasks noted in this section, as well as the sanitary tasks that I'll be talking about in just a moment, that growth-related projects or the growth-related portions of mixed projects are to be funded by impost fees and which are paid for by the development community with the intent that growth pays for growth and the general public does not pay for development related projects. Here are some examples of some of the preliminary projects that are being considered, and I spoke about most of these on the previous slide.
Thank you so much. As noted before, the slide's up for a discussion. Any questions you might have around water or the project to date, keep an eye on the Zoom box here, our email, or raising your hand if able. I'll just give it a second here. I do apologize if the door goes off. I think there might be delivery, of course, right at this slide. So I have a question coming in here. Is the additional water storage in Odessa contemplated, or is additional water storage in Odessa contemplated?
Thanks. That's a great question. So it is contemplated. It's something that will be reviewed. So based on the existing storage capacity and sort of proposed growth, we'll be looking at the needs for storage in Odessa, most certainly through this process.
Perfect. And a raised hand, Debbie, if I think Tony has his hand raised, correct?
Yes.
Perfect.
You should be able to unmute now, Tony.
Hi there. Just a question about the communities that rely on individual wells as it relates to the water infrastructure. Is there plans to amalgamate those communities into the municipal water structure, or will kind of wells be ongoing and as far as we can see?
Thank you, Tony. Jenna or Dave?
Yeah, thanks for the question. It's a good question. So I think the answer is that we look at extensions of the municipal water system to facilitate development that will be occurring. We don't necessarily look at extending the municipal water systems into areas where the size and makeup of the lots means that wells are able to adequately provide water to the residents. So our official plan delineates our current urban boundary, and those are the areas where we look at implementing our municipal water services, but we don't look at implementing municipal water services outside of those urban boundaries that are delineated within the official plan, the township's official plan. I don't know if anyone has anything they'd like to add to that.
Jen, I might just jump in and just say the costs of servicing rural lots is inefficient in terms of a business case for the municipality and for its residents. We're probably talking about $500 to $600 a lineal meter to put in a residential water main. So if you think of course of a rural road, what that might be, it's pretty pretty heavy on upfront cost sort of thing to make that happen. On the other side of the coin, though, and Jenna mentioned the official plan, the municipality is trying to restrict the number of rural lots such that rural groundwater supply isn't impacted by growth. In Loyalist Township, that can be difficult with the geology. I mentioned earlier, the limestone bedrock can have problems. So it's an important criteria that people keep an eye on, that, you know, the groundwater is a resource. A little bit later, we're going to be talking about natural resources, and groundwater is an important element in that. But unfortunately, to answer your question, there's right at the moment, there's no immediate plans. If you have a specific situation that you'd like to comment on, you know, you can use any of the input methods there that we've noted tonight and make your comments known, and we'll take a look at it. That is the point of this thing, is to get those comments in.
So like if there's development adjacent to a rural community where there is mostly well water, would it be the developer's responsibility to bring in the service, the water service?
Well, I can say right now, the township has to follow its official plan. And as far as I know, there's no higher density projects in any rural areas, other than, you know, they're all adjacent to serviced areas right now, either in Odessa or Amherst or Bath. So you might see individual lot development here or there in Wilton or Morven area or somewhere like that, but you're not going to see a rural subdivision at the moment. That's not in the radar based on the official plan.
Okay. Well, I mean, I'm in the Amherst View West plan area, so I know that I guess there's some changes coming down like through that particular area in terms of potential different development and land uses.
That is correct. So we'll be touching on that in a minute, and maybe Jenna can adjust her comments and answer that when she goes through there.
Okay.
Tony, just while you're on the line, did you have questions on the rural broadband issue? I do have somebody that can answer that if you had further questions.
No, I'm okay for that. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, everyone. So as these slides pop up, I think the next one we have, if I'm keeping an eye, and there will be more opportunity for input, is sanitary. And I think it's back to Jenna.
Thanks, Dan. Okay, so in terms of the sanitary sewage system, in this section, we're discussing sanitary sewage, which is also referred to as wastewater and includes anything that leaves your house through your plumbing. It does not include stormwater that collects in a separate piping network through catch basins and ditch inlets outside. As we start this section, I would like to remind everyone in attendance that the only things you should be flushing are pee, poo, and toilet paper, and flushable wipes are not flushable, and you should not be flushing them or anything else other than what I've specified previously, or we have the potential to end up with a much longer list of required infrastructure improvements. So for the sanitary side of things, similar to the water system, a major component of the sanitary system review will be to look at the growth-related projects that will be necessary to facilitate ongoing development. We have 2 sanitary sewage treatment plants in Loyalist Township. One is in Amherst View on Taylor Kidd Boulevard, east of County Road 6. This is called the Loyalist East. This services the Loyalist East sewage system, which services the communities of Odessa and Amherst View, as well as our Loyalist East Business Park. This facility currently has a capacity of 6,400 cubic meters per day, and approximately 85% of this facility's capacity is being used or has been allocated to approved developments in Amherst View and Odessa. We will be reviewing the needs of this system, which may be more extensive than the growth requirements for the water treatment plant in this area. The second sewage treatment facility is the Bath Sewage Treatment Plant, which is located on Sir John Johnson Drive. Like the water treatment plant in Bath, this facility also services the Bath community as well as Millhaven and Bath penitentiaries through agreement with corrections. The facility is rated at 3,008 cubic meters per day, of which approximately 30% is controlled by corrections. Approximately 90% of the capacity that is controlled by the municipality is in use or has been allocated to developers who prepaid for previous plant upgrades. We will also be reviewing the growth needs for this system over the planning period. Both sewage plants will also be reviewed to determine the extent of other process improvements that are required over the planning period. It is expected that there will be the need for some upgrades at each of the plants over the 25-year period. As outlined previously, the future needs review is complicated by variable factors such as growth rates, changing demographics, and variable consumption due to improvements to fixture flow rates in homes. Sanitary sewage usage also varies by system with the Amherst View system generating approximately 25% more sewage per equivalent residential unit than the Bath system. This discrepancy is likely as a result of leaking sewer mains or pumping stations within the Odessa and Amherst View areas, which is constantly being reviewed and will be reviewed also through this process. The sanitary collection system, so the pipes in the ground and our pumping stations, will also be reviewed through the process. We'll be looking at areas where sewers may need to be upsized or otherwise modified, and we will review the need for any new trunk sewers to development lands. Sewage pumping stations will also be reviewed to ensure that they have adequate pumping capacity and wet well storage, and to make plans to ensure that no areas of the township become deficient over the planning period. Preliminary sanitary projects. So on the next slide, there's a list of some sanitary projects that are being considered. Just next slide. Yeah, thanks. Of note is that we will likely need to construct a sewage pumping station and trunk sanitary sewer to convey sewage from the Amherst View West secondary plan lands to the Amherst View sewage plant. And as noted, we will be talking more about the Amherst View West secondary plan in a few slides, and I'll get back to Mr. Sturman's question.
Back to Q&A or discussion, questions on sanitary. I do see a question here in the Zoom chat. So for anyone else, email, Zoom, or raise your hand and I'll check in. So the question is, will timing of the plant upgrades include allocation for specific areas? Can triggers be estimated to expedite upgrades in high growth scenarios?
Sorry, I'm just digesting the question. So I'm just trying, sorry, I was just reading. So in terms of allocation for specific areas, I believe the question is referring to, between the different communities that are connected to a specific system, will we be identifying, how much capacity goes to one area versus another? So that's an interesting question. It's not something that had been specifically considered, but we can hold on to that question and have some discussion and provide an answer later. I will say that there are other pieces of infrastructure that are existing that will sort of factor into some of those considerations. So in terms of water capacity and pumping capacity to different areas, storage capacity in different areas, and in terms of sewage pumping capacity and those sorts of things are some of the other pieces of infrastructure that will need to be reviewed through the process. Dave, did you have something you wanted to add?
Well, I guess the one comment I wanted to make, or the initial comment, is part of this process is to make sure the development community is aware of the process, and we're looking for the feedback of what possibly might be out there. And we have sent notice of commencement letters to all of the currently active development participants. We haven't heard too much yet, but we're hoping to hear shortly. So if there's anybody out there listening and we can't tell who the participants are, we certainly encourage to get that information, and we'll probably have some focused discussions later on. In terms of allocations, the municipality doesn't formally allocate capacity until draft plan approval. Loyalist Township has in the past sort of theoretically looked in the crystal ball and said who was bringing projects forward, and informally set some capacity aside, but that process is informal and not formal, and again, you need the subdivisions to be, go through the proper process before that allocation is finalized. So the best thing is to make sure the project team is aware of your thoughts and plans, get your information to us, and also remember that the towns, like the infrastructure placement, will only be done in accordance with the official plan. So if the official plan doesn't line up with your intended areas of development, then that's the starting point. And we're at this stage, we can only look at what the official plan includes. And 5-10 years down the road, if there's a need to upgrade the plans, and that's something we would look at an amendment or something at that time for the people involved. Okay.
Thanks, Dave. There's actually another question here as well. I'll read it out. Will existing secondary plan areas be allotted capacity prior to proposed secondary plans and prior to draft plan approvals, i.e. a capacity for Odessa versus Amherst West?
So I think,
Do you want me to just jump in there, Dan, Jenna, or do you want to?
sure, no,
Go ahead, Dave.
Well, I'm just going to go back. Is capacity is allocated at draft plan approval, and which projects get draft plan approval is a decision of council.
the only other thing that I'll add is that staff is working on developing a policy for the allocation of capacity, which will hopefully be presented to council in the fall. So that may answer some of these questions that are being asked as well.
Thank you, Jenna. And thank you everyone so much. Like this is, it's really nice to see this feedback coming back in. And again, this is that kind of start of all of this too. Sign up for the email online there. You can send more information in, everything will get a response. I'm going to move over, I think now to the next slide here, which will be on transportation. And of course, we'll have a discussion on transportation coming just down the pipe, I guess.
Dan, we just have Mr. Hilson. He has his hand raised again. I'm not sure.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Hilson.
Just allow him to talk now. Mr. Hilson, you'll have to unmute. Okay, it may just be a hitting the button by accident then.
Now, can you hear me now?
We can hear you,
Yep.
Mr. Hilson.
Okay. With your permission, I'd like to backtrack slightly with respect to water and usage. I'd like to know when the township is going to make it mandatory to install a septic tank when a new house is built in order to capture rainwater for non-consumption use, such as watering grass, washing cars, and flushing toilets. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hilson.
I can try to answer that question. So thanks for your question. I guess I can say that this is the kind of feedback we're looking for from people for items to be considered through this plan. We're certainly cognizant of the fact that there's a need to look at, what our treated municipal drinking water is used for as compared to what stormwater runoff can be used for instead, as you're suggesting. We will sort of take what you're suggesting and review it. We have been promoting a partnership with some of our local schools who have been selling rain barrels as fundraisers. We have been promoting that and would encourage anyone to make use of rain barrels to undertake some of the activities that you're suggesting. But I would say in this specific case, currently there's no plan in place to make it mandatory for people to undertake that sort of initiative. But we will note your suggestion and consider it as we're looking at both the water side and the stormwater side of things, because those types of activities can impact both of those areas.
Thank you, Jenna, and thank you, Mr. Hilson. There will be more opportunities again for coming down for another Q&A slide, and no problem backtracking to see if maybe there's something you thought of that you'd heard. I think this is exactly what this is for. We're now up to transportation tasks, and I think Mr. Thompson will take it over from here.
Okay, thanks, Dan. I'm going to highlight some of the projects that are under consideration for transportation in the infrastructure master plan over the next few slides. It's difficult for the general public to get excited about water and sewer plant capacity. Unfortunately, many of the IMP projects, although important in providing basic municipal services, do not seem to contact people's lives on a daily basis unless there is a big problem. Luckily, transportation has an element more familiar to the general public. This slide provides what I call some of the more human elements of the IMP. Some examples are identifying neighborhoods with poor sidewalk connectivity to other parts of the community and looking for key routes. And for those of you who live in the older parts of Amherst or in Bath, you know what I mean. There's those areas are not well serviced with sidewalks, and those concerns have got through to us, and we're certainly looking at it as part of the project. Another thing that's come up, especially with COVID, is identifying potential active transportation routes. And when I say active transportation, it means bike paths and links to recreational trails, working with the county with their paved shoulders and that sort of thing. The other thing that's coming through loud and clear is some of the public, like local traffic calming, and the IMP is not going to be guaranteeing traffic calming in every location, but certainly if there's legitimate issues, we'll be looking at them closely. In addition, the IMP will be looking at road intersections impacted by growth within the township. And for clarity, the County of Lennox and Addington administers the county road improvements, and MTO administers improvements along Highway 33 and 401. As such, county roads and MTO highways are not included in the township's infrastructure master plan. An example of technological changes are the unloading ferry allows larger vehicles to Amherst Island. What are the impacts of this change? The conversion of using straight rock salt and the introduction of applying liquid brine for roadways, for roadway de-icing, requires changes to equipment and storage facilities. And the use of brine itself has negative impacts on the environment. Are there other options? Examples of a regulatory change are recent updates to standards for sidewalk crossings and intersections to meet the AODA, also known as the Accessibility for Ontarians with Disability Act. The new standards include a gradually sloping sidewalk to the asphalt surface with a tactile plate located in line with the crosswalk. Retrofitting older sidewalks within the township will be a significant undertaking. And we had a talk the other day, and if we don't step in and do something differently, this conversion could take 25 years, which in my opinion is probably unacceptable. So that's one of the reasons we're looking at it as a separate project within the IMP. Another example is where Transport Canada has upgraded municipal road requirements to level train crossings. The township works closely with Lennox and Addington County, and especially their transportation group. And through the IMP, the township hopes to continue to coordinate our projects. Examples are County Road 6 in the Amherst area, and Main Street, Odessa, and recently Church Street in Bath. Climate change is impacting our activities. What can we expect in future years? The IMP will provide an overview of expected climatic changes to be experienced in the future and impact of these changes on the township road systems, as well as adaptive measures to be undertaken. All of the projects in the infrastructure master plan will be screened for climatic impacts. This slide is a list of the IMP road projects identified to date. So as we've gone through all of the developer submissions and pulled out projects to talk to our operations staff, and this is our initial list, and subject to the feedback we get, it'll grow accordingly. This list does not include other road projects being rehabilitated as part of life cycle maintenance, or for projects where construction is planned prior to the completion of the infrastructure master plan. I wanted to note that the township has traffic studies identifying the need for 2 intersection upgrades. One of these is Amherst Drive at Spears Boulevard, and the other is Main Street Bath at Windermere Boulevard, respectively. And that intersection doesn't look like that today, but For those who don't know, Windermere is expected to be the main street running up to County Road 7, eventually into Loyalist Boulevard. The alternatives under consideration currently are traffic signals, four-way stop signs, or roundabouts. Now we're going to switch over to stormwater. Oops, I'm running ahead. Sorry, Dan.
Hey, no problem, Dave. I would like to open it again for transportation. This is a great opportunity for some feedback. And if you're watching this and throughout the next while, if you see anything that just, when you're walking and you see something, please, there's a great opportunity to submit it via the email or the form online. Before I'll be looking at Zoom right now, I do want to point out there's a couple questions here as well. I'll look for hands in just a second here. But one is actually Mr. Hilson from the previous question, but a great point, and we are recording it. It's just regarding new housing or water and new housing around when the township will make it mandatory to install septic tank in order to capture rainwater for non-consumption use. The greatest consumption use for treated water is, I believe, flushing toilets. A use that does not require treated water. It's time to give it serious consideration. We'll make sure that's noted. Thank you for that. Any more questions? I do see one here from Paula, Dave, and Jenna. I'll put out to you. Will Taylor Kidd extension be going through?
I can take that one, Jenna, if you don't mind. The county did do an environmental assessment for the extension of Taylor Kidd from County Road 4 westerly through to County Road 7 about 10 years ago. And 10 years is a magical number because that's the life of an environmental assessment. I've talked to the county staff and they're planning to recommence the now expired environmental assessment. That's probably good news because what that means is that project's not high on the radar. And in defense of the county, some of the main drivers for the project 10 years ago or more are gone. And when I say that, if you're around long enough to remember when Celanese was in full gear and Bombardier or its predecessors were in full gear, there was a lot of employment traffic right in that immediate area, as well as the commuters. And at that time, the community of Bath was expected to grow larger than it is today, like another 400 or 500 units at least. Full development of the golf course and stuff was anticipated. And as we all know, Celanese is no longer with us, and the Bath community is growing at a good pace, like it's 4 or 5% a year, but it's nowhere near what Garth Vent had and Graham Pye had originally intended. So that being said, there is overall growth in the traffic. The study is probably going to start in the next year or so, but I wouldn't expect the project to be constructed. I would say it'd be lucky it's within a decade, unless there's some infrastructure funding that the county can utilize for it. And as it is a county project, it's not in the IMP. Hopefully that answers your question, Paula.
Thank you, Dave. I have another question here. I'm looking in the Zoom chat, and I'll look for hands in a second here. I'll read this chat out from Tony. For proposed intersection upgrades, is there a team to address accessibility needs? Example, visually impaired individuals with mobility challenges, etc.
Our first starting point would meet the Ontario with Disabilities Act requirements. That being said, as those projects unfold, and they're unfolding now as of this public engagement, we would like to get any comments that people have. Certainly, what's the word I want? The style, the design of the intersection improvements will have big advantages or disadvantages. And roundabouts are great with traffic, but they have their own specific pedestrian issues. Modern signals all have chimes and are upgraded from what typical signalized intersections have, but again, there may be design considerations and stuff that we can employ, especially if we're aware of local situations. So we would love to get some feedback, more feedback on this. If you can send some stuff in to through our email, or give us a phone call or whatever. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. And I'll check with Debbie just in case there's a hand I can't see. Debbie, do you see any hands out there?
I don't see anything at this point, at this time.
Thank you so much. I'll move on. The next up, we're heading into stormwater.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just reading the questions here. So stormwater is one of the more complex pieces of the IMP puzzle. The older sections of Bath and Odessa were developed long before modern stormwater management was the norm, and as such, there are many areas below current design standards. The township is growing quickly, putting more pressure on the natural environment, and the local limestone bedrock is not the best geology for assisting with stormwater management. Many areas within the township don't meet the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks guidelines for stormwater quality, which have evolved significantly over the past few decades. And, you know, as a young engineer, we were only interested in handling stormwater quantity, but since the time I graduated from school, the emphasis is left off quantity. Anybody can deal with that, and the emphasis is now on stormwater quality. So in the last 20, 30 years, there's been big changes, and those changes continue. The provincial regulations for the design, construction, and operation of sewage works, both for storm and sanitary, have recently been amended and will greatly impact Loyalist's current operations. The province has instituted source water protection, and for those who don't know, much of the waterfront in front of Amershey and Bath has some pretty tight restrictions, and low impact development guidelines, which both have significant local impacts. A good understanding of the regulatory requirements is required when completing an analysis of the stormwater needs for the township. Moving to the next slide, staff have identified the specific stormwater infrastructure master plan projects listed on the slide. As the County Road 6 develops in Amershey, one of the questions outstanding is, will that corridor be developed with permanent ditches, or will a storm sewer go in? So those are sort of things we're working through. What are the ultimate outlets for the new development area currently known as the Amershey West Secondary Plan? And are there remedial issues that should be addressed? And that can open a bit of a can of worms. We're not really interested in the IMP about local lot drainage, or individual lot drainage. And if you have some concerns, they should be forwarded to the Public Works, and we can facilitate that through our project. But I would recommend a direct call to Public Works. But what we're looking at, situations like the township faced with, I'm going to say Highland and Bristol, where we had perennial flooding issues. I shouldn't say flooding issues, but the water levels were such that we almost had flooding issues, and we're, people, homeowners and ourselves were biting our nails. And luckily, the township received a healthy grant a few years ago, and it sped up an improvement project. But the chances of getting grants of that size are rare, so those projects are difficult to complete. But if if there are serious neighborhood problems, that would fit in. Sorry. I'm just going to turn that off. So just going to go back here a little bit. So moving on to the miscellaneous tasks slide, MJ. Oh, sorry. This slide here is just a listing again of some of the projects that we plan on having. Some of them are remedial, some of them are new. And moving to the next slide is miscellaneous tasks.
I'm gonna interject. I think back in there, Dave, for a check-in point, maybe.
Yeah, sorry, did I miss that again?
That's okay. The next one here, yeah, it is, but I do see some questions coming in via email as well as the chat there. So one, just referring back, Jason, I'm kind of going through, I apologize if I missed that last slide there. It was more of a comment, but I do appreciate this because all these comments are getting recorded and being put into the project file. From a logistical and environmental standpoint, roundabouts make far more sense in areas such as Loyalist, specifically where you've outlined these traffic lights or four-way stops. Sorry, I didn't read that well. I would even like to see a roundabout replace the four-way stop at Spears and Kildare. Also creates more visibility, creates a more visually appealing intersection. Wow, I apologize. That is a comment that will be captured, and I hope we captured it on how I read it. We will make sure it's verbatim. Going back, I have another one here from an Odessa resident here. Going back to your last slide, so this might be a couple slides back, is Crichton Drive included in your infrastructure master plan? Also, will there be drainage issues dealt with along the north side of County Road 2 at Crichton? And if so, what is your timeline to deal with it? And sorry, Jenna or Dave?
Yeah, so I'll jump in on that one. When we did the Odessa West plan, part of the evaluation of the consultants that were involved in the project recommended upgrades to both Potter Street and Creighton at certain stages of development of the new development that's extending to the south in that area. We're very close to those trigger points now, so those projects are in the design stage, or if they're not in the design stage, they're very close to it. As part of that project, we were looking at remedial needs, drainage needs along Creighton, South, and Potter Street. There's no specific design available yet, or exactly what's what. Drainage along the county right away is not necessarily part of the scope of the project, but we are working, that would be a county responsibility, but we are working closely with the county on the project because they're handling the County Road 2 and Creighton intersections themselves within their right of way. And the township will be doing some work on the older sections of Creighton down to South Street to match the new development. I'm sorry, I don't have a specific timelines. That's all part of the evaluation that we're doing right now, working with the various players.
Can I just add one thing? Sorry, I would just add that if you have specific concerns and you live within that area, if you go to loyalist.ca/projects, you can click on the area where it talks about that project, and you can get some contact information there to provide feedback to the design team so that can be considered within the design that's happening.
Thank you, Jenna. And I do apologize. I was reading that quickly and I really mispronounced Creighton. So I do apologize there. I also saw at the same time an email come in from Joan on Amherst Island. Please tell me what changes we can expect to see due to this master plan in all areas of Amherst Island. So I can, if you guys would like, would somebody like to answer it now, or I can maybe hold it until after miscellaneous if there's more touch there, but I'll open up to Dave or Jenna just to answer Joan on Amherst Island asking about what changes can be seen due to this plan in all areas of Amherst Island.
There's two projects that come to my mind right off the bat here, and I'm just thinking through if I'm missing any more, but there's a lot happening on Amherst Island, except a lot of it's not falling into the infrastructure master plan criteria of new or improved, with a couple of exceptions. And we have one large project in the latter part of the design stage, I'm not sure whether it'll go to construction next year or the year after. Those are council decisions. But that's the reconstruction of Front Road from where the new MTO property limits are southerly through the developed area of Stella. And likewise, Front Road from the public school to the east end of Stella. So a full reconstruction there. It's not finalized yet, but that project may include a storm sewer installation. And we're also hoping that we can improve the sidewalks through that same area. So one of the major things is the intersection of Stella and Front Road is not very friendly to larger vehicles, as anybody knows on the island. So we're trying to address that. And secondly, the existing grades through the community of Stella don't allow us to kind of just resurface and build up again. The road's getting relatively high to the other properties, and there's some that's creating a need to do a bigger scoped project than was originally hoped for in that area. But so that's the main project. The second project's probably a longer term project, but for a long time there's been a plan for trail development along the around the island, and basically geared probably more for, well, I guess for local recreation, but also for tourists and bird watchers, whoever else who would travel either by foot or by bicycle. And through the IMP, we hope to start showing some routes for that and some suggested improvements. And I must say that this isn't limited just to the existing roads. On the contrary, with the roads being as narrow as they are and some of the speeds that are traveled on Amherst Island, we're also looking at using some of the unmaintained road allowances and or some of the lesser traveled roads, which may not be of interest because they don't have the same water view. So there's obviously a balance there that will ultimately have to be found, and I don't know what that answer is, but you know, we'll start the process in the IMP.
Thanks, sir. I'm gonna just go one more time, just out to Debbie to see if there's any hands, and then we'll be moving on to the next task list.
No hands at this point, Dan?
Thank you, Debbie. Now on to the next miscellaneous tasks.
Here we are. Okay. As mentioned earlier, the township will be utilizing several existing documents as well as detailed engineering reports. Information from these documents has already been used as guidelines to develop preliminary list of projects for view within the IMP. And Jenna and I have been sharing those preliminary projects with you. For purpose of this detailed review, the purpose of this detailed review is an attempt to coordinate the township's many activities so that the core infrastructure needs are available in a timely manner and available to support other timely initiatives as required. The infrastructure master plan also identifies any new financial requirements well in advance. This is important as the planning and implementation process for some projects can be comparatively long. The first step is to ensure adequate funding is in place. For a complicated project like the expansion of the MSU water pollution control plant, the project is expected to take 3 to 5 years to complete planning, approvals, design, and construction. Less complicated projects such as new piping and road reconstruction are typically on a 2-year schedule. These next slides list a few miscellaneous projects. Developing facilities to assist with new provincial excess soil regulations. Something new is promoting natural asset recognition. And this is something I wish I had learned long before. But it's a concept that illustrates the physical and financial value of natural systems. You'll be hearing a lot more of that, I hope, over the next few years. The township also needs to be in a position to respond to servicing requests for the Taylor Kidd industrial area. And also high on the list from the public works folks is developing a snow dump, a municipal snow dump. The township continues to seek strong industrial partners. These partners require municipal services such as water and sewer capacity. Without ensuring the adequate resources are available for the township to serve residential, commercial, and industrial needs, the township may miss out on opportunities for local employment. On the other hand, creating this capacity requires an expensive municipal investment, well ahead of when an industry is up and running. The IMP is designed to identify the constraints and opportunities for servicing industries. An important component of the IMP will be to establish which projects are growth-related projects. This determination is important as generally growth-related expenses are funded by development charges, and water and sewer and impost fees applied to new development are not funded by general taxation. I might have said that a little bit wrong here. I'm just going to go through that again. This determination is important as generally growth-related expenses are funded by development charges and water and sewer impost fees or connection fees applied to new development and not funded by general taxation. I now want to return to one of my opening comments. The presentation below preceding was designed to introduce people to the overall scope of the IMP, or the big picture, as one of the team members said yesterday. This presentation is a high-level overview, and the details will be listed in a comprehensive final report. The project team now needs your input to assist with the project. Please identify enhancements or concerns that you may have relevant to the identified core infrastructure of the project team, and we'll be using those in our further analysis. Thank you.
Thanks so much. We'll have another miscellaneous task slide here, and we're kind of heading down the final stretch. We only have a couple more slides with a few more details about timelines and some overlap to the secondary plan. But I'll look in here. I'm getting a bit better, I think. Don't see anything in the Zoom box. Debbie, any hands by chance?
No hands at this point.
Okay. Well, we're heading in. I'm going to pass it on to Jenna.
Thanks, Dan. Okay, so the Amherst View West secondary plan, we touched on this briefly earlier. So concurrent to the commencement of this process in 2020, the township also commenced a secondary plan process for lands expected to be developed west of the existing Amherst View community. So as detailed on the map, it's the lands between Taylor Kidd Boulevard and Highway 33 and between Parrots Bay and County Road 6. The secondary plan review will be completed independently from this process, but will maintain line of sight with the IMP. There will be a feedback loop between the IMP and the secondary plan to ensure consistency between these two processes, and that any infrastructure identified as being needed through the secondary plan process is integrated into the infrastructure master plan. The IMP will include core infrastructure elements required for the servicing of lands within the secondary plan area, and specifically those that are not fully funded by external developers. Of note, the Amherst View West secondary plan team is also holding a visioning and information sharing meeting this week on Thursday at 6 p.m. And just back to a question that Mr. Sturman had earlier regarding wells in this area. So if there are residents who have that question about potential connections to municipal servicing in the future, if it's being provided adjacent to your property, I'd suggest that you should reach out to the Amherst View West secondary plan team or to us with those specific questions, and we can look at your specific situation and try to get an answer as to what might be allowed or possible moving forward.
And Jenna, I'm just going to jump in there. I had said that there's no development planned adjacent to communities or existing higher density areas, and I guess there is one exception, and that's Bayview Drive and Parrots Bay Lane is on the west flank of the Amherst View West secondary plan. So I stand corrected, Mr. Sturman, and as Jenna said, those are good comments to get into the meeting on Thursday night, and we'll also put them in our hats here, and perhaps we can have a future conversation. I'm not a planner, and there's some complicated planning stuff you're right on the borderline there. So I'm hesitant to say anything further without doing a little bit of homework, but I think we can get you some answers with some more detail if you'd like to make contact with us in the future. Thank you. Our contact information will be up on the screen shortly.
Okay, and just the last sort of presentation slide discusses timelines and milestones for the infrastructure master plan. So last year we started some of the background work and technical review, and we have recently issued the notice of commencement and are starting our public engagement activities. Over the coming months and into early 2022, we expect to complete technical reviews and continue engagement. And in the spring or summer of 2022, we hope to finalize the plan. A reminder that opportunities for public participation will culminate with the ability to review the report once it's complete, and specific appeal rights exist that were discussed previously.
Thank you so much, Jenna. I do see, and I think it might have been covered there, what is a question in the Zoom box. What is the anticipated completion date for the IMP? So it's just discussed in that timeline there, hoping for spring or summer 2022. And I'm just kind of looking at the Zoom box with the final thoughts, just a couple more slides, just giving you a couple more minutes or a couple more seconds to see. Debbie, are there any hands up? Sorry, I just got a ding. Sometimes I don't know if it's coming in here.
Yeah, no, there isn't anybody at this point, Dan.
Perfect. And really, thank you so much. I know here it is on a Tuesday night, and it's 7:30. Taking time out of your days to give feedback on the community is very important. This live feedback is important. On top of this, please continue. This is really just the start of that. If you see things in your day-to-day, whether emailing the infrastructure master plan list, please consider signing up for the infrastructure master plan email list, because we'll be able to give more succinct and communicate it to you. Provide comments and engage with the team. We're here, and this is what we do. So please reach out either via the email, any specific comments, they'll all be recorded, as well as an online form, which should make it easy, or reach out to the team as well. And lastly, please, after signing up for the email, consider watch for more participation activities. I'd like to thank everybody for tonight. There's a little bit more information here. There's that address, the infrastructure master plan at loyalist.ca. More information can be found on our website, and that's David and Jenna's contact there specifically. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your evening. Please connect and share your lived feedback with us as we continue to develop the infrastructure master plan. Thank you so much.
Okay, we're good then. We can end the session. All right.
Yes.
There was just a comment at the end to Dan that it wasn't a question. Just wanted to thank you for providing an informative presentation tonight. With that, I will end the session. Thank you.
Thank you.
Did you pay that guy, Dan?
Thank you.
It's not my uncle.